I always end the intro to my podcast with the words, rediscovering the truth of who you really are. But let's spend a second talking about that thought, rediscovering the truth of who you really are. I mean, we women often go through our lives putting the needs of those we love ahead of our own. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. I mean, we're put here on earth to love, but sometimes the balance is off. And we're so deep into being nurturers that we forget to pay attention to the most important person of all, ourselves. So, how do we begin to start paying attention to our needs after all that time focused on others? How do we learn to listen to that loving inner voice inside us? To help us figure it out, I'm pleased to welcome my guest, Integrative Wellbeing Therapist, Jamie Lerner. Jamie believes that you are the one who knows what's best for you, and she writes about this in her book, The Ever-Loving Essence of You. Welcome to the Dream Power Experience, Jamie.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Well, Jamie, one of the things that you say is that you believe it's important for us to pay attention to that inner voice. But I have to be honest with you, a lot of times that inner voice inside of me is just full of negative things that keep talking back at me. So, how do I learn to trust that voice if it's dominated by negativity?
I think that first we need to learn to laugh at ourselves because if we really tuned in and heard ourselves say the things that we do to ourselves, we would realize we would never speak that way to another. And most of it is ridiculous and it's actually very funny. So I think that when we have a little levity around this subject, which sometimes can feel really heavy and almost daunting, that is helpful.
I'm
And
glad that you said, have some laughter about it, because you're right. Whenever we're talking about, self-improvement or getting into like getting deep into ourselves, it does sound so serious and, you know, oh, we don't even want to start because, it's going to be very serious. And, it's like to have that levity. You can learn to laugh at yourself. You can see those things that on paper or sometimes when we're thinking about it, things seem so dark and daunting, but they're just stories we tell ourselves, and we could change that, right?
absolutely. And I think not laughing necessarily at ourselves, but with ourselves. And I think that's a really nice way to begin to love yourself and to embrace yourself and to accept yourself.
Well, I
We
tell you,
can, yeah.
when I talk to my clients about loving themselves, the first reaction I often get is it's selfish to do this. So talk to me about the difference between selfishness and self-love and why it's so important for us to nourish our self-love.
The first thing they tell you to do when you get on an airplane is to put your own oxygen mask on first before you assist others, which is so counterintuitive to us, especially to women. However, when we do not nourish and nurture ourselves into connection first and foremost, then anything that we do for another, we tend to resent and to feel really unhappy about. And if you're not going to think about yourself, think about how it feels when somebody is doing something for you and they're resenting it. It doesn't feel good to receive that. And it doesn't feel good as the giver to give that. So I tell people if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for others. Because once you're able to do for yourself, even a little bit, to be on the receiving end of you as the giver feels so much better. It feels better to you and it feels better to the person receiving. It's a win win.
Oh, absolutely. And when we do make that commitment to love ourselves, we open up so much space that is being right now covered with, doubt and fears and all those negative things. And when we remove that, all this space opens up so we have the capability and the capacity to love others and to love them unconditionally.
This is so true, and it feels so good when we can do that. However, I'd like to suggest not making a commitment. That just sounds like um, that sounds really heavy. But maybe just
That's
making
true. That's
a
true.
shift, just a small little shift that you will make a decision to address yourself first and foremost in the morning, even if it's for 10 minutes, which is a really nice reminder that you are so worthy of your own love. And I really ask people to just sit and ask themselves, what do they appreciate about themselves? Not what others appreciate about you, but what do you appreciate about yourself? And to come up with just a few things is a very nurturing and nourishing activity.
It is. I mean, I have done this for myself many times. I've also found that some people find this very hard. You ask them to do it, and they're like, I don't know. So what do I love about myself? And they come up with a blank.
Well, you don't have to know, but I think to explore with loving curiosity, not even what you love about yourself, but what do you appreciate the most about yourself? And surely to come up with one thing, I think that's a great start.
Or it is, and sometimes they even need a prompt to realize, oh yeah, I can go in that direction. Like, even if, let's say they're unhappy with their body, for example, there's maybe one body part they like, oh, I love my eyelashes, or something,
Perfect.
something,
Yeah,
or maybe there's some quality, like maybe you're a person who, you know, is a great cook, but they don't think of that as being a loving thing, but it can be.
absolutely. And it's a very powerful acknowledgement to yourself, from yourself, about yourself. That does not include another.
Absolutely. And you're right about taking the time to do it. It's also saying that you're important and you deserve that 5 minutes a day, that it doesn't involve anybody else.
Exactly.
Indeed. I want to talk about, going a little bit, uh, to change the subject, but talk about a concept called pre-paving. So tell me about that. What does that mean?
Well, it's interesting. We do it just naturally, but we tend to do it negatively. We dread getting in our car, anticipating traffic, anticipating we're going to have a terrible day with long meetings and blah, 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 blah. So we're naturally doing that. But pre paving is something that we can do positively. We can think about how we want our day to go, that we'd like to get in our car and we'd like to appreciate our car. And anticipate that we are not going to have traffic, and anticipate if we do have traffic that we're going to be able to get so many things accomplished during our drive, whether it's listening to a podcast or music or returning phone calls. And then when we get to work, that we're going to have just a wonderful day that's going to be easy and feel effortless. And we've brought our lunch with us, and we're looking forward to having a half hour to eat lunch slowly. And so once again, it's like brainwashing ourselves in the morning to have this amazing day. And it tends to work, because what you think about is what you get. And most people think about what they don't want. And what do they have all day long? What they don't want. So it is all within our power to create our day, pre paving it from the very beginning to be and go exactly the way we want it to go.
That is just a wonderful idea. And again, it's something that anybody could do. It doesn't take,
Yes, it's simple.
training,
Yeah.
or like
Or
we talked about, or
money,
like we talked
right?
about
Or
commitment. It's just a
yeah,
matter of saying, okay, well, what do I have to do today? And and frame it as a positive action, instead of thinking about, oh, what I have to do wrong. Even if it's a chore or something you would call a chore, you can frame it in a way so it's saying, like, oh, I have to clean the house today and I hate to clean the house. But you could say, well, no, I'm going to spend this time to make my house beautiful, and I'm going to
exactly.
love the way it looks when it's done. You're still doing the same action, but because you've talked about it and pre-paved it in that positive way, not only do you feel better about it, but you feel better doing it, and
Exactly. Yes.
of that.
And it's all within your control. Like nobody can do this for you. That's like 99% of the possibilities of all of this. I don't want to say work, but nobody can do this for you. But you can do it for yourself if you choose.
And it's so important that, in a world where so much of what's going on outside is out of our control, we don't have control over inflation or the economy or wars or climate change or any of those big, heavy things that are going on. But we do have that power to control how we
Yes.
feel about ourselves.
What we choose to think about and how we're choosing to feel about what we're choosing to think about. So that's a lot of power. It truly is. And it feels really good when we step into that personal power.
It does. And the more you do it, the more you realize you can do it. And so like if you're starting from, a point, a low point, people listening to the podcast can't see I have my arm up, but you're starting from a low point, and the more you do it, the more you raise your energy level and the more confidence and self-assurance you feel, and all of those positive things just start to grow.
And it gets easier and easier. And then it's a lifestyle.
Yes. Well, once it becomes a habit also, then you've just, you know, embodied it into your being. And that's a total life-changing experience.
Truly.
And you can do it all by yourself.
Yes.
Nobody else is doing it for you. And it's very good. Uh, but something that often happens with a lot of people is getting able to really figure out what their needs are, and to align with them in a way that really gets them to feel it and to take action on it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
If we could imagine, and we do a lot, all the things that we wish others would do for us, to identify that, that would be a need. So, what would we like others to do for us? Can we do those things for ourselves? And when we can, it feels a whole lot better to do it for yourself than to wait and wish that another would take care of these things for you. Every year at my birthday and Christmas and every holiday, Mother's Day, I go out and I buy myself the gift that I want. And I wrap it up in beautiful paper and ribbon and pick a beautiful card out. And this is my gift to myself, and it makes me so happy, and I'm never disappointed.
That's true. You do it. You're never disappointed.
Yep,
And what a wonderful
it's a
exercise
gift.
to do. Who doesn't like opening gifts? And
Exactly.
you give it to yourself. It's a
Right.
wonderful, wonderful present. And it's another way of amplifying that self-love. I
Yes.
deserve to get a gift.
Yes.
And I best gift I could do is the gift I give myself.
Exactly.
Well, Jamie, a lot of times when we're paying attention to our feelings, we often tend to hide or discount them in front of others because we don't want people to think less of us. So we hide those things that maybe we don't like or bothering us. But is that a really healthy way to act? And if not, how should we be dealing with our feelings in the most healthiest way possible?
No, that is a really good question. The first thing is, I think that if we would not judge how we're feeling in the moment, that would be very helpful, and not worry about others judging us. But I think it is our responsibility how we feel every single moment. No one can make us feel any way. And we get stuck in this pattern of believing that people can make us feel a certain way. We can choose to feel a certain way as a result of what someone else is saying or what someone else is doing. Or we can make the choice to really think about it in terms of what is our responsibility for how we're feeling in this moment. And it's a really great question to ask yourself because most of us want to be a victim. And it doesn't really help us in any way for growth or for how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about others. I don't think there are any victims. So every interaction with another is actually a golden opportunity for us to look at ourselves in a loving way, in a curious way, and ask ourselves, like, what's going on? How are we getting triggered by whatever it is that's happening? And what do we want to do with that?
Yeah, and it's so important to take that time to really explore, like what is the behind of what's causing those feelings. Uh, you know, you're right. A lot of people do like to play the victim, and it's because there's something negative going on that is causing them to feel like, I don't deserve something, you know, or or uh bad things always happen to me kind of thing, which is focusing more on that negativity than focusing on, reframing it in a more positive way, so that, maybe you want to play the victim because, you're looking for sympathy because you don't feel that love. But if you work on, and then work is also a strong word, but, if you take those steps to learn how to love yourself, you don't need that validation from anybody else.
No, you don't. And we can never get enough validation from others to ever feel good. So at the point that we understand that the validation of ourselves is really the only validation that we need, it's very freeing. But the phrase I tell people to consider when somebody is speaking to them and someone is sharing their feelings with them, like you made me feel this, whatever, is to say, I'm so sorry you feel that way, because that allows you to acknowledge that you did not make them feel that way. This is their choice. You're acknowledging that you're sorry that they feel that way, but you're not saying that you created or caused them to feel the way they're feeling.
Right.
But it goes the other way too. Nobody can cause you to feel that way either. They can acknowledge you feel that way, but it is never about the other.
It isn't.
Ever.
And,
Ever.
and when you're talking about that, it reminds me of the people who also can't take a compliment, because, you'll say, oh, Jamie, I love your shirt. And you'll say, oh, this whole thing, or, to deprecate it. And it's, you're, a lot of people do that because they don't feel that loving sense to accept it. But when you don't appreciate a compliment, you're also not honoring the person who's giving you the compliment.
This is true.
Yes. Uh, well, I'll move on to a little something else that you talk about in your book, because this was something that stood out for me when I was reading it. Because you talk about procrastination, and I've always believed procrastination is something to be avoided like the plague. I mean, you're not going to get done when you procrastinate, but you make a case that sometimes it's good to procrastinate. So tell me about that.
Okay, I think procrastination is our friend. I think it's gotten a bad rap. And I think that when we are procrastinating, it gives us an opportunity to pause and to get into alignment with the task at hand. Nothing good comes from doing something that you feel pressure to do and feel so bad about doing. It just doesn't. But when you give yourself a moment and say, okay, I am just not feeling good about this. So I'm going to come back to it when I can and do feel good. The minute you give yourself that pause and ability to kind of take a breath, it's interesting how quickly you do come back around to it and do it with no resistance. To do anything with resistance is usually a big failure. And quite frankly, everyone has their own system. Some people wait until the last minute. That's not procrastination. That is your personal system of how you get things done. Does it always get done? Yes, it does. Is it a pressure cooker? Maybe. That's the way you operate. But honor that, accept that, and give yourself a break. You'll
Okay.
always do it. Do you want to
Well,
do it feeling good or not?
yeah. Do you always do it? Because sometimes, there are things out there like, a new project to start, or maybe looking for a new job, and you find ways to keep from doing it. And sometimes it never gets done. So
Then
what happens
then
then?
and then it just doesn't get done. Nothing happens then. At a certain point, it becomes important to you, but you do it because the timing is right, or you've given yourself enough room so that you come around to it in a different way. But nothing happens. Nothing. Procrastination, believe me, is your friend.
Yeah.
When my kids were little, I would say, they would say, I don't have to do this. And you're like, you're right. You don't have to do it. Would you like to? And they're like, sure. So, the minute you take the resistance away, I think the quicker you're able to look at it from a different angle, at a different moment, in a different time. Trust yourself. This is where we get to this concept of trust yourself. Know yourself, love yourself, trust yourself.
So are you saying then that if you don't put the pressure on yourself because, you know, the people around you are saying do it, or you are saying do it, if you don't put the pressure around yourself, then you will just naturally get to that point where you say, okay, well, now I'm ready.
I think so. It's called alignment, thoughts and feelings as one. And when you're in alignment with anything, everything goes, it's just effortless. Everything just feels easy. You haven't put any resistance in the equation. And that's kind of like how we have great success. You know, someone is trying to write a book and they're talking about how they're sitting down at the same time every day and they're trying and they can't even get a word down. It's like, clearly, you're not in alignment. Like, let it go for a while, let it come back to you. And it does, it comes back to you when you allow it to without resistance.
Well, what if you have things that are on deadline?
Then you reframe the deadline. Because really, what is a deadline? I think the minute we hear deadline, then there's immediate resistance. We feel pressure. So, how can you reframe this idea of a deadline and turn it into something more positive?
Hmm. Okay, that's one I'm going to have to wrap my head around. I mean, having been somebody who's thought procrastination was a bad thing, so I will have to defer to that. Uh, but one thing I will talk to you about, which I thought was very interesting, is talking about our memories. Because there are times when it's good to look back on memories and times when our memories really hold us back. So can you talk a little bit about the difference in that?
I think that when we look back to reflect on something that was really positive and fun and joyful and happy, I think that that's very productive for us. And we should do that as often as possible because it creates a very good feeling within us. When we are looking back on something that is painful and difficult, I ask people to look back at those things from your here and now adult perspective. Because if you can do that, it really changes everything about what those moments look like, what those moments feel like, and you're creating a whole different scenario that is much more reflective of your now.
So a lot of times we talk about events that have happened in our past as events, and then the stories that we've told ourselves about them, which have created the feelings, which most of the time end up being negative when we look back at them.
And completely blown out of proportion and very dramatic.
Mhm.
So, to recreate that entire story or storyline or sentence or tone, it's much easier to do it from our here and now adult perspective.
And would that be the same as rewriting our memories?
It would be the same as rewriting our stories, that's for sure. And a lot of it too is fact checking because over the years, these memories or thoughts have just gotten bigger and bigger and more exaggerated. We live in a society that loves trauma and drama and really encourages people to tell the worst possible things that have happened to themselves. And they get a lot of sympathy. And when we diffuse all of that and really bring it back to either what it was or what we can understand it to be in our now, It looks different. It feels different. It feels better. But we are not going to get that kind of attention. So it's kind of a choice. Do we want to feel good and begin to really embrace those things that happen to us and turn them into our strengths here and now, which is usually the case, and accentuate that? Or do we just want a huge audience and be a victim and, I don't know,
You
stay
know,
in the circus?
listening to you, Jamie, one of the things that really stands out is that making these positive changes is really pretty easy once we decide to do it. And maybe the hard part is deciding to do it.
And it could just be a tiny little moment each day. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. But when we embrace this with curiosity, loving curiosity, and some fun and some good feeling thoughts, it is easy.
Mhm.
It's easier.
It is, that's for sure. Well, Jamie, do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
Once again, love yourself, trust yourself. No one knows better for you than you.
Well put. Well, Jamie, how can people find out more about you and your work?
I have a website, www.jamie-lerner.com.
Hey, we've been speaking about reconnecting with ourselves with Jamie Lerner. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.